instructional video on how to tie a dry mayfly fly with a synthetic wing. For this fly I'm going to be using Camazan B440 dry fly traditional hooks. I've been using them for years and I've found them to stay sharp, to be highly durable, and I have never had a problem with them, so I'm happy to carry on using them. We will just put a hook in the vise and then proceed with the tying. I am using, for this particular fly, I am going to be using a thread. My preference in thread is the Danville 70 denier thread. It's a very fine thread which is easy to apply and work with. If I like the 70 denier because of it's really thin and easy to lay. However, if I'm tying a salmon fly, I might increase the thickness and maybe go up to a 140 denier. But I have found that I've been using Daniel threads for almost 15 years, and I'm very happy to stay with them. So the first step in tying any fly is to lay down a base of thread along the length of the hook. I normally would catch the thread on like that, and then just very simply I would then trim the point of the thread off like that, and then continue laying the thread down to the end of the hook. Now, a little trick that I've learnt is that if I'm tying in a couple of tail fibers, I then just lay a little bobble at the back of the hook of slightly thicker thread, which you might be able to see, and that then just allows my tail on the fly to just stick up a little bit as opposed to being drawn around the bend of the hook. And so what I'm going to do now is just get a couple of fibers of partridge tail, not partridge, pheasant tail, and I'm just going to tie them in as a tail on the hook. If you have a look there, that's probably a bit too much, so I'll take some of the fibers away and I'll just then tie that on. Some tie flies are very careful about the number of tail fibers they tie, and I'm probably not that worried about it, and I haven't found it affects my fishing, and so there I have tied in my tail fibers. The next thing I'll do is I'll put a little bit of very thin brass wire onto the fly to act as a rib. Now, I really don't believe that this fly needs a rib for the fish attraction purposes, but I always like to put a rib on because it strengthens the fly, and then once you've had a couple of takes of a fish on the fly, it doesn't start pulling the body dubbing in all different directions, and so it keeps the integrity of the fly going. So there I'm just tying on a piece of the brass wire into the fly, and then I will just fix up the tail of the fly. So there you can see I've now put the tail of the fly and got my ribbing to work. Just another point of interest, I always use a small pair of side cutters to cut any wire and not my delicate scissors. I'm really trying to keep the scissors as sharp as possible. The next thing is to put on the body for the fly, and that I'll be doing by using the method which I find that works for me. I just lay a little bit of beeswax. This is a little block of beeswax, and I just put a little bit on my thread. There we go. And then I'll take the dubbing of the color I want, and for this particular fly I'm just going to take a medium green piece of dubbing, which I'll extract out of my dubbing box here, and I generally hold it at the back of the fly, wet my fingers, well, back of the thread, wet my fingers a little bit, and then I just roll it onto the thread like that. And then I find is a very easy way of spinning a noodle of dubbing onto my thread, and then I just dub the body up like that. if I need to add more, I add more, and one of the tricks with dubbing is always put less on than you need and add if you need extra. Don't overdo it, it just makes for a messy fly. So there's the dubbing, and you notice I leave a reasonably big amount of space at the top of the fly to put my wing on. It's just I don't like being constricted by space when I get to work at the top, and you'll notice this on all my flies I leave a reasonably good space. I then wrap my rib around the fly body, tie it in like that, lay it down a bit, bend it up. A lot of people just bend it off to break it. I'm normally not that patient, so I just snip it off with my side cutters. There's the body of the fly and the tail tied on. Now it's time for the wing. So I'll be using a bit of this Aero wing. It's a synthetic material, very effective for wings. You can get it in many different colors, and generally I take 2/3 of the thickness for a fly of this size, and then I cut a piece off about 2 centimeters long, trim it nicely, and there you'll see my piece of wing, which I lay at a 45-degree angle over the top of my hook. I just catch it like that, pull it straight, and then I will then just put a couple of loops of thread around it to pull it at right angles to the hook body. So there I have my piece of synthetic wing tied in quite nicely and squarely to the fly. And then what I will do is I will just loop a couple of times round the wing like this, and as I do it you'll notice that the wing starts lifting up and standing proud of the fly, giving the up wing shape of a typical mayfly, which is exactly what I want to achieve. And that's just done by rotating around the wing and lifting it up. And there I have my fly ready to start tying the hackle on. At this point I might just trim the wing a bit if I feel that it's too long. It's always good to trim it before you put your hackle on, because trimming it afterwards you might, by mistake, trim some of your hackle away. So there, I've trimmed it nicely. The next thing is to get my hackle, and as always I'll trim away some of the more wispy ends to it. There's my hackle. Now I would just use one hackle per fly. I lie it at the back of the wing. I'll catch the center part of the hackle behind the wing, and then I will also push it over between the two upstanding wing fibers, and then I'll just catch it at the front as well, and then I'll trim that off. Now I'm ready to tie the hackle in. With a fly of this size you probably don't need hackle pliers. I do 3 or 4 turns behind the wing and the same in front, and then I will catch it off with my thread, and I've almost finished the fly. And the next step would be to trim the wing, trim the hackle off, which I just do like this, and then to tie a head on. And a little trick I use to tie the head on, I always just wet my fingers, and by doing that I can get purchase on the fly material, pull it back and tie a really nice head in there. I then trim, if there are any fibers or feathers sticking through, I trim it, and then my last step would be to cast off my fly using my whipping tool. I normally just do 2 turns first. It prevents it from unraveling, and then here you can see me putting around about 5 turns with the whipping tool, finishing off the fly, and then I would just trim it off, and finally I would cement the head using a bit of varnish. Here I just use a dubbing needle to apply the varnish on the head. Once again, I only ever use clear varnish. Other people might use a black or red varnish depending on the fly they're using. I've just found that the clear varnish allows the color of the thread to use, so I just make sure I use the correct color thread for the fly, and then I only ever have to have clear varnish. And there is my dry fly finished and ready to go use in the fish. So I'll just show you, rotate it a bit so you can have a good look. You can see there the fly wings are standing nicely up, and the fly is very successfully tied and very strong. You could use this fly and fish with it the whole day without it falling apart or being water out. Thank you very much for watching my video.